She lied about our savings and stole $250, $0 to run away with her boss, then filed for divorce claiming I cheated, and now she's claiming half the house worth $750, $0, all while trying to hide she's been secretly working with him to drain our accounts. I never thought I'd be the guy caught in a web of lies, betrayal, and outright theft, but here I am. It all started with little things. My wife had always been a bit high maintenance, but I figured that was just her personality, demanding, bitchy, but charming enough to keep me around. We'd been married for 8 years, living in a nice house in the suburbs with 2 decent jobs and what I thought was a solid life. But then little cracks started showing. At first it was small. She'd be secretive about her phone, hiding her texts, deleting things. I didn't think much of it. Women do that sometimes, right? But then I noticed she was spending a lot more time on her laptop after I went to bed. She'd be whispering on the phone in the bathroom, and I could hear muffled voices. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just talking to friends or work stuff, until I caught her in a lie about the bank accounts. It was a random Tuesday when I decided to check our joint account because I was suspicious about some recent charges. That's when I saw the first massive red flag. Our savings, which I'd always believed were solid, had been drained. I mean, completely wiped out. It was a sum of about $250, $0. That kind of money, gone. I called her immediately, furious, demanding an explanation. She burst into tears, claimed she was just moving money around for an investment that she'd been keeping from me. Said she wanted to surprise me with a new business idea. I knew she was lying, but I didn't realize how deep this was about to go. I pressed her harder, and that's when she snapped. "You don't trust me after all these years. You're just paranoid," she spat, her eyes cold. That's when I started putting the pieces together. Her attitude had been off lately, more bitchy, dismissive, and secretive. She'd been working late, claiming it was just stress, but I knew better. Something was up. Then came the night I found her phone left on the kitchen counter, unlocked. I saw a string of texts between her and her boss, Mark, an older guy she'd always flirted with, but I never thought she'd actually cheat on me. But there it was, explicit messages, plans to meet, and even talk about how she'd escape with him once she had enough money. I saw photos of her in some hotel room, half-dressed, with Mark. My stomach sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years, all those promises, and she'd been lying to my face. I was furious, betrayed. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I needed to think. This was bigger than a simple affair. She, stolen from us, lied about our savings, and was planning to run away with her boss. I felt like I'd been blind, but now I saw everything clearly. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And the worst part, she was still trying to deny it, still spinning her web of lies. That's when I decided I'd have to play this smart if I wanted justice. After discovering the evidence of her affair and her theft, I felt like my world was crumbling. I sat there in the dark, staring at her phone, trying to process what I'd just seen. The betrayal cut so deep. I'd always thought was just a difficult woman, bitchy, demanding, but loyal. Turns out, she was capable of lying, cheating, and stealing $250,000 without a second thought. It was like a punch to the stomach every time I thought about how she'd been secretly working with Mark, planning to run away with him, draining our savings, and pretending everything was fine. That night I stayed up, going through every message, every call log. My mind was racing. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. How had I missed all the signs? She'd become more aggressive, more dismissive, snapping at me over small things, and then suddenly she was planning her escape. I was furious but also heartbroken. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? How did I miss the signs that she was planning something so big, so destructive? The next day, I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I called her into the living room, and her face immediately shifted when she saw my serious expression. I laid everything out, her secret texts, the hotel photos, the missing money. Her eyes flickered with panic, and she started to deny everything, saying I was paranoid, that I was inventing things. She called me crazy for even suspecting her, but I wasn't buying it. I knew exactly what I'd seen. I told her I wanted the truth, and I wanted it now. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, saying she was overwhelmed, that she'd made mistakes but she loved me and she was sorry. She claimed the money was for a business venture, something she'd kept secret because she was afraid I'd stop her. She even had the nerve to say she was doing it all for us to give us a better future. That was the moment I realized how good she was at lying. She spun her story so convincingly I almost started to doubt myself. But I didn't. I knew she was lying. The more she talked, the more I saw through her bullshit. She was trying to manipulate me, turn things around so I'd feel guilty, so I'd back off. But I wasn't buying it. I told her she needed to pack her bags and leave. I told her I wanted a divorce and I wanted her out of the house immediately. Her face twisted into a sneer and she spat, "You'll regret this. You always do. I'll take everything from you, your house, your money, everything." That was her way of trying to intimidate me, but I knew she was desperate. That confrontation was a turning point. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and betrayal. I kept thinking about all the years I'd spent building that life, our house, our savings, our future, and how it was all being ripped apart. My stomach churned with anger every time I remembered her sneering at me, claiming she'd take everything I had. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized that I needed to be smart about this. If she was willing to steal that much money and lie to my face, I couldn't just let her walk away. I had to protect what was mine. I started thinking about my next steps, how to get the evidence I needed, how to make sure she wouldn't walk away with a dime more than she already had. That night, I stayed up again making plans. I knew she'd try to hide her tracks, so I set up some hidden cameras around the house, especially near the computer and her phone. I also contacted a lawyer, knowing I'd need legal help to fight her claims and to protect our assets. My mind was racing with questions. How much more was she hiding? Was she working with Mark to drain our accounts further? I had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight. I was angry, but I was also determined. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked for without a fight. In the back of my mind, I kept replaying that moment when I first saw her with Mark in that hotel. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. Now, I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was going to make damn sure she paid for what she'd done. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, surveillance, and trying to piece together exactly how deep's betrayal went. I spent hours poring over bank statements, transaction histories, and her phone records. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been lying to. She'd been working with Mark in secret for months, draining our accounts bit by bit. The $250, $0 she stole was just the start. I found evidence of multiple withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts, and even a hidden stash of cash she'd kept aside for her escape plan. What made it worse was her attitude during all this. Instead of showing remorse or trying to fix things, she doubled down on her lies. She told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that she'd never cheat or steal from me. She even accused me of being controlling and said I didn't trust her, that I was the problem. Honestly, I was starting to see her for what she really was, a bitchy, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with anything. One night, I caught her in the act. I had installed a hidden camera in the living room and I saw her meeting with Mark again. They were whispering, holding hands, and she was even giving him a kiss on the cheek. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just cheating. She was planning a full-blown exit with him, helping her drain every penny we had. I felt a surge of rage. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built together? And the worst part, she was trying to hide it all, lying through her teeth, pretending she was innocent. I knew I had to act fast. So I gathered all the evidence I could, screenshots, bank statements, recordings, and I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to get a restraining order, freeze her access to our accounts, and prepare for the inevitable court battle. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, crying crocodile tears and claiming she was the victim. She'd say things like, "You're overreacting," or "You don't understand what I'm going through." But I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes, and I knew she was trying to manipulate everyone around her. One of the most shocking moments came when I confronted her directly about her plans to run away. I told her I knew she was working with Mark and that I had proof. Her face twisted into a sneer and she snapped, "You think you're so smart, huh? Well, I've already taken half the house's value and I'll take the rest if I want. You're just a control freak. You're lucky I even stayed this long." Her words hit me like a punch. She was so brazen, so unrepentant. It was clear she had no intention of stopping until she drained us completely. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the betrayal, her sneering at me. I felt sick, like I'd been punched in the gut so many times I couldn't breathe. But beneath all that, there was a strange sense of clarity. I realized I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to protect myself, my assets, and my future. I started drafting a plan, how to get her out of the house legally, how to freeze her accounts, and how to fight for what was rightfully mine. I also reached out to a private investigator to see if there was more she was hiding. Turns out, she'd been secretly working with Mark for months, draining our accounts little by little, trying to hide her tracks. I was furious. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and the fact that she'd been lying to my face every step of the way. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, but I also knew I had to be smart. She was dangerous, calculating, and willing to do whatever it took to get her way. The emotional toll was enormous. I went from feeling devastated to furious, then to a strange numbness. I didn't know how to feel about her anymore. She was still pretending to be the victim, still trying to spin her lies, but I saw through her now. I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd betray her own vows for a quick escape and a big payday. And I was done being the fool in this story. I was ready to fight for what was mine, and I knew this was only the beginning of a long, ugly battle. By the time I had all the evidence lined up, bank statements, texts, recordings, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Plan. To run away with Mark was more than just an affair. It was a full-on scheme to drain every cent we had and disappear. I'd been naive to think she was just a bit of a bitchy wife with some bad moods. No, she was a thief, a liar, and a manipulator. And I had to act fast before she managed to execute her escape completely. I met with my lawyer the very next morning. We drafted a motion to freeze our joint accounts, and I filed for an emergency restraining order to keep from leaving the house or transferring any more money. I knew she'd fight it, but I was prepared. I also hired a private investigator who confirmed my suspicions. She'd been secretly working with Mark to siphon off our savings over the past few months, hiding the money in offshore accounts and secret cash stashes. The whole thing was so calculated, it made me sick. Meanwhile, was still acting like the innocent victim. She'd cry, claim she was overwhelmed, and throw in some fake apologies. But I saw through her. She had this bitchy sneer whenever she thought I wasn't looking, and her eyes darted around, trying to hide something. She'd been working with Mark to drain our accounts, planning her escape, and now she was trying to spin it as if I was the bad guy. That's typical. She always managed to turn things around on me like I was the one causing the problem. One day I found her trying to withdraw more money from our offshore account. I caught her in the act and she froze when she saw me. Her face went pale and she stammered, "It's just for a little emergency. I need it for us." I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I had enough. I'd already contacted the authorities and I was going to make sure she paid for her lies and theft. That was the moment I realized she had no remorse, no shame, just greed and selfishness. The house was a battlefield now. I changed the locks, blocked her access to the accounts, and started the process of dividing everything fairly, though honestly, I was prepared to fight for every dollar. I also started documenting everything, knowing I'd have to prove her plans in court. Every time she tried to deny or spin her lies, I had proof ready. The texts, the recordings, the bank withdrawals, everything was pointing to one thing. Was trying to leave with as much as she could get her hands on, and she'd lied to everyone, including her own family, about her business ventures and her innocence. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control of the situation, fighting back against her manipulation. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, respect, and the years I'd given her. Now I saw her for what she was, a selfish, bitchy woman willing to do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying everything we'd built. I started to realize I was better off without her. I'd been clinging to the hope that she'd change, that she'd see reason and stop her plans. But that was wishful thinking. Had made her choice, and it was time I made mine. I filed for divorce, and I made it clear I wasn't going to let her walk away with half the house, which was worth about $750, $0. I knew she'd try to claim it all, but I was ready for that fight. I had the proof, and I was determined not to let her take what wasn't hers, especially after everything she'd done. The hardest part was facing the reality of losing what I thought was my life, my home, my savings, my stability. But I also knew that staying in a marriage filled with lies and betrayal wasn't an option anymore. I had to stand my ground, protect myself, and move on. As much as it hurt, I understood that sometimes the only way to truly reclaim your life is to cut out the poison. And with her manipulative, bitchy attitude was the poison I had to get rid of. The legal battle was brutal. Fought tooth and nail, claiming she was entitled to half the house, which she insisted was community property, even though I knew she was trying to hide her secret accounts and her involvement with Mark. She painted herself as the victim, crying foul about how I was controlling and abusive, things she'd never shown before but suddenly threw into the mix to sway the court. Honestly, I'd never felt so betrayed, so humiliated. It was like she was trying to steal my life and then call me the villain for fighting back. I had all the evidence I needed, bank statements showing the withdrawals, the texts where she was conspiring with Mark, the recordings of her meetings. I also had her trying to manipulate our mutual friends, telling them I was crazy, that I was the one cheating and lying. It was infuriating to see how far she'd go to smear my name, all while secretly working with her boss to drain our savings and run away. The judge saw through her, but that didn't make the fight any easier. It dragged on for months, with her trying every trick in the book to get her way. Meanwhile, I was trying to rebuild my life. I moved out of the house temporarily into a small apartment. I was angry, yes, but also exhausted, emotionally drained from the constant battles. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all this. How did I not see the signs? How could she pretend to be the perfect wife for so long and then turn into this manipulative thief? The worst part was feeling like I'd been played, like I'd invested 8 years of my life into someone who was only after my money and my house. I started therapy to deal with the emotional. It helped to talk through everything, how betrayed I felt, the anger, the sadness. But deep down, I knew I had to stay focused. I had to fight for my rights and protect what was left. I had to be smart about how I handled everything legally, financially, and emotionally. I also kept a close eye on her. She was still trying to hide her tracks, making secret calls and trying to transfer more money. I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little. One of the most shocking moments came when she finally admitted, in a moment of rage, that she'd been working with Mark for months. She said they'd planned everything, how she'd drain the account slowly, hide her tracks, and then leave with the money. She even had the nerve to say she deserved half because she'd sacrificed so much. I wanted to scream. Sacrificed. She was the one who lied, stole, and betrayed everything we had built. I realized that her version of sacrifices was just her way of rationalizing her greed. The court eventually ruled in my favor on most fronts. The judge ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and I retained ownership of the house, which I was told was legally mine because she'd hidden her accounts and lied about her involvement. It was a small victory, but it felt like a huge relief. Still, I knew the emotional scars would take longer to heal. The house was a symbol of everything I'd lost: trust, stability, the life I thought I knew. Through all this, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that trust is fragile and you can't take anything for granted. I learned how dangerous it is to ignore the signs of betrayal, to dismiss the small things that seem insignificant at the time. And I learned that sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away and fight for what's rightfully yours. Betrayal has changed me. I'm more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of the importance of honesty and integrity. Now I'm trying to rebuild my life piece by piece. I've moved on from the house, from the heartbreak, and from the anger. It's not easy, and I still sometimes wake up feeling the sting of betrayal, but I'm hopeful. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to start over. And if I could give one piece of advice to anyone going through something similar, it would be this. Trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Because at the end of the day, your integrity and your peace of mind are worth more than any house or bank account. Looking back, I realize that the whole ordeal has changed me in ways I never expected. I used to think I was a trusting, straightforward guy, someone who believed in loyalty and honesty. Turns out, those are luxuries you can't always afford when someone you love is capable of such deception. I'll admit, the pain of her betrayal lingered for a long time, but what's more surprising is how much I've learned about resilience, about standing up for myself, and about the importance of protecting what's mine. The house, once a home filled with love and dreams, became and then, eventually, a symbol of my victory. I fought hard for it, not just because of the money or the property, but because it represented my life, my stability, the part of me that refused to be broken. I'm not proud of how it all went down, but I am proud that I refused to be a victim. I refused to let her steal everything, including my dignity. The emotional scars will take time to heal, but I've come to accept that sometimes walking away is the only way to reclaim your peace. I learned that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired, and that some people are simply not worth the pain they cause. Her manipulations, her lies, her greed, they all taught me a hard lesson about human nature. But they also taught me that I am stronger than I thought. I can survive betrayal, I can fight for what's right, and I can rebuild from the ashes of what was lost. Now, I look forward to a future where I can trust again, where I can find happiness on my own terms. I've cut out the toxicity, the lies, and the greed, things that once seemed like part of my life but are now just distant memories. I've learned to value honesty and integrity, and I won't settle for less. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you who they really are, whether it's through their lies, their greed, or their manipulation, believe them. Protect yourself, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Because in the end, your peace of mind and your integrity are worth more than any house, any money, or any relationship built on lies. I'm finally at peace with what happened. It hurts, it's painful, but I know I came out of it stronger. And I hope anyone else facing similar betrayal finds the courage to stand up, fight back, and reclaim their life. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply walking away and building something better from the ruins.